Bring in our political analyst, former head of the Illinois Republican Party, Pat Brady, who stood me up today on our swim in Lake Michigan, but I'll let you go, all right? I guess you had other more important things to do, right?
Like sleep.
Like sleep, that's true. We had to make up. All right, so we haven't talked today yet, Pat, but last week we sure did a lot about this very thing, and you thought, as most, I guess, who are commenting today, that this was just an inevitability.
Yeah, the Biden campaign ended a minute into that debate a month ago. And it was just time. It probably too bad it didn't happen quicker for the Democrats. But I think the good news for the Democrats is they're going to be front and center, and they're going to steal all the news for the next month going into their convention. That's why I know people want to do this early roll call. Man, if it were me, I would stretch this out and do a rousing roll call vote if they can all get unified behind the vice president and just do a big roll call vote here in Chicago and roll out of that convention with a lot of momentum.
So you probably heard late this afternoon there was talk that Joe Manchin, the West Virginia senator, was considering re-registering as a Democrat after registering as a Democrat, or as a Democrat after switching to independent in December of last year, I think it was. I'm sure there are a lot of Democrats who are thinking there is no way I can envision a Biden-Harris delegate voting for Joe Manchin, but what does his potential insertion? It's the only name we've heard so far, right, is potentially taking on Kamala Harris for this nomination.
Yeah, and remember, the people that are going to make the decision here are the delegates. These are the real party loyalists, like the people we saw last week up in Milwaukee, hardcore party loyalists, and they're not going to be too open, I don't think, to somebody that's left the party and declared themselves independent and took a lot of votes that Democrats don't really care for. So I don't think he has any play there. I think it's the most interesting thing here is, as you discussed before, the vice president, with Governor Pritzker being in the mix, Governor Beshear, Gretchen Whitmer. That will be a really interesting pick. But in the next couple of days, we're going to see if anybody's going to surface and actually try to challenge her. It doesn't feel that way right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does. You
mentioned the VP pick, Pat. You and I talked a lot in Milwaukee about J.D. Vance and his value added to the Republican ticket, and that is directly in those states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. During the convention, there were speakers who addressed that head on, and they, I think, feel like he helps them in those states. How does Harris's selection counter that potentially?
I'm not sure how much that's not overstated. I think the bigger issue is going to be the difficulty, I think, for the vice president is, and the Republicans started doing this at the convention. I mean, she's got a record. She's not coming in clean. This is the Biden-Harris administration. So she's going to wear a lot of the jacket for the things that people are upset about now. The two major issues being inflation and the border. And she was put in charge of the border. So there's going to be a pretty pointed attack on her. Point is, do the Democrats in this process select somebody that's not part of this ticket? They might be in a better position, notwithstanding the money, to have a kind of a clean break from the past and be the shiny new object, which people apparently are looking for. That being said, I think just her gender is going to put the abortion issue back in play much more than it's been with two 80-year-old men.
Yeah, you just mentioned that, though, and you heard Lori Lightfoot talk about who else has the national exposure that Kamala Harris does. And if you're talking about trying to get to a point where you have a fresh face, I know you told me in Milwaukee that you thought they should go with someone else because, as we saw the signs at the convention, Biden equals failure. And in your opinion, Harris is Biden 2.0.
Yeah, at least I think that's the way some people may feel about it, particularly when dealing with the immigration issue, which she was in charge of. Another thing, too, that people haven't mentioned, and listen, I've got a healthy respect for the vice president. She's a very accomplished woman, but she did not do very well when she was on the national stage campaigning for herself. And that was the thing that people were waiting for during the Iowa caucuses to see how she would perform, and she did not perform well. In the first 2 years of her vice presidency, there were a lot of gaffes and kind of silly statements. And again, she's got to prove herself to be a better national candidate, I think, if she wants to beat, the Trump machine that they've got going now. So we'll wait and see. But I'll be interested to see. She's going to have to keep it together here for 8 weeks. She's going to have a good debate performance. She's going to have to get the Democrats unified. She's got a lot to do, but she does get a big boost having all that money available to her right from the get-go.
I know we talked, Pat, about how a majority of people didn't want Trump or Biden, and neither party listened, I guess you could argue, although the Republicans did go through the primary process, and the Democrats did too, and ended up with Joe Biden. But you were backing Nikki Haley, which would have been another interesting twist had that happened. I think you felt she would have done better against Biden. But now we're in a position where it looks like it's going to be Harris and Trump. Do you think Trump still wins as you did before this?
Well, I don't know. Right now it's advantage Trump, but you got to today, as we start today, throw all the polling, all the punditry, everything aside. This is a new race. And there hasn't been a whole lot of analysis, except in the last couple of weeks, of how she fares against President Trump. We did see his statement that you read earlier in the broadcast, which I thought was a mistake, to not congratulate Joe Biden, President Biden, but rather attack him. I think that made him look petty, and that's why I think his speech at the RNC the other night made him look petty towards the last 40 minutes of it. So I don't really know. We'll see. But Vice President Harris is going to have to perform and perform well, and she's not going to have a lot of room for error. And she's going to have a strong debate performance. I assume we're still going to have this debate in early September between those two, and that will be something to see.
All right. Pat Brady, as always, thanks for the time and the insight. We'll see you soon.